The first thing I noticed about Black Hollow was how quiet it was. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. Not the small town, birds chirping, kids playing on front lawns kind. No, this was a different kind of silence. The kind that felt unnatural. Heavy. Like the town itself was holding its breath. I pulled my cruiser up to the police station, an old brick building with a flickering porch light. The drive from Chicago had been long, and my bones ached from the hours behind the wheel. I had taken this job for a fresh start, a break from the chaos of the city. After a messy divorce and a near-death run-in with a gang member's switchblade, I figured a quiet town in the middle of nowhere would be exactly what I needed. But as I stepped out onto the cracked pavement and looked around, something felt off. Black Hollow was small, barely a dot on the map. The main street stretched a few blocks, lined with old buildings that looked like they hadn't been updated since the 70s. The general store had faded lettering above the door. The diner had no customers despite the open sign, and the gas station's single pump looked rusted beyond repair. Most small towns had some kind of charm. This one didn't. I shut the car door and headed inside. The station smelled like stale coffee and old paper, the kind of scent that seeps into the walls over decades. The front desk was empty, but I heard voices from the back. I made my way past a row of outdated filing cabinets and found two officers sitting at a table, playing cards. One of them, a grizzled-looking man with gray at his temples, glanced up. His badge read Grayson. "Sheriff Ethan Grayson." "You're late," he said flatly. I checked my watch. "My shift starts tomorrow." He grunted and tossed a card onto the table. "Then you're early." The younger officer next to him, a guy who looked barely old enough to drink, gave me a tight-lipped smile. He didn't introduce himself. I glanced around. The station was small, just a couple of desks, a radio, and a single holding cell in the back. A corkboard near the door had a few old missing persons flyers pinned to it, the edges yellowed with age. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked over to the coffee pot and poured myself a cup. "You don't talk much, do you?" I said, nodding toward the younger officer. He shrugged. "Better that way." Grayson leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "Tell me, Lancaster, why'd you come here?" I took a sip of coffee. It was terrible. "Needed a change," I said. "Figure small town would be a good place to slow down." Grayson let out something between a chuckle and a scoff. "Slow down. That's what you think you're going to do here?" I narrowed my eyes. "Isn't that what small-town cops do?" He didn't answer, just studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then he nodded toward the far wall. "Come here." I followed his gaze to a wooden plaque mounted near the door. The letters were carved deep, the words simple but strange. The 5 rules of Black Hollow. 1. Never answer a knock at the door past midnight. 2. If you hear whistling in the woods, go inside and lock your doors. 3. Always leave an extra plate of food outside on the first Sunday of the month. 4. If someone goes missing, do not look for them. 5. Never question the rules. I read them twice, then turned back to Grayson, waiting for the punchline. "You serious?" I asked. "As a heart attack." I let out a short laugh. "Come on. What is this? A town prank?" The younger officer's jaw tightened. Grayson's face didn't change. "You follow the rules, Lancaster," he said. "That's all you need to do." Something in his tone made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. "You expect me to believe this crap?" I said. "What happens if I break them? A boogeyman gonna come get me?" Grayson stood up slowly. He was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered and solid. When he spoke again, his voice was low, steady. "Just follow the damn rules." And for the first time since I set foot in Black Hollow, I felt something creeping in the back of my mind. A feeling I couldn't shake. The distinct, suffocating sense that I had just walked into something I didn't understand. The call came in just after sunrise. I was nursing my second cup of coffee at the station when the phone rang. Sheriff Grayson barely glanced up from his paperwork before answering with his usual grunt. I watched as his face darkened, his jaw tightening. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I hear you, Claire. Stay put. We'll be right there." He hung up, allowed a long sigh, then looked at me. "Get your coat. Kid's gone missing." "Missing?" I asked, already pushing back my chair. "Since when?" "Sometime last night," he muttered. "Kid's name is Adam Weaver. 17. Didn't come home." I waited for him to say more, but he just grabbed his hat and walked out. That was the first sign something was wrong. Back in Chicago, a missing teenager would have had the whole precinct buzzing. Calls made, units deployed, news stations alerted. But here, in Black Hollow, the sheriff treated it like an everyday chore. Like a busted streetlight or a lost dog. That didn't sit right with me. By the time we pulled up to the Weaver's house, Claire Weaver was already outside, arms wrapped around herself despite the morning sun. Her eyes were red, her face drawn and pale. As soon as she saw us, she rushed forward. "You have to find him," she cried. "Please, Sheriff, please." Grayson caught her by the shoulders. His voice was calm, steady. "Tell us what happened." Claire swallowed hard, glancing at me before speaking. "He went out last night, just for a little while. He does that sometimes, you know. Just walks around, gets fresh air. But he always comes back. Always." Her voice cracked on the last word. "But last night, he didn't come back," I said, finishing her thought. She nodded. I waited up. I called his friends, checked the places he usually goes. Nothing. It's like he just disappeared. I took out my notepad. Did he say anything before he left? Anything unusual? Was he upset? No, she said quickly. He was fine. Just normal. And then I heard it. I frowned. Heard what? Claire's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes flicked to Grayson, and something silent passed between them. A warning. "Nothing," she whispered. "Just nothing." I didn't believe her. Grayson cleared his throat. "We'll look around. See what we can find." Claire grabbed his sleeve. "You have to bring him home." Grayson didn't promise her anything. Neither did I. We started at Adam's room. Small, clean, nothing out of place. The bed was still made, the desk stacked with books and notebooks. A half-full glass of water sat on the nightstand, untouched. It was like he hadn't planned to be gone long. I checked the window. Unlocked. "Looks like he left on his own," I said. Grayson stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Told you." I ignored him, stepping outside. The Weaver's house sat at the edge of town, near the treeline. A narrow dirt path led into the woods. "Where does that go?" I asked. Grayson's expression didn't change. "Nowhere good." I was already moving toward it. "Then we should start there." He sighed but followed. "You really don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" He didn't answer. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. Even in the early morning, I expected to hear birds, the rustle of small animals, the crunch of twigs beneath my boots. But there was nothing. Just silence. And something else. A feeling. Like being watched. I brushed it off and kept walking, scanning the ground for footprints. That's when I saw it, half buried under a patch of damp leaves. A shoe. I crouched down, heart thudding. "Sheriff." He stepped beside me, looking at what I'd found. A dark expression crossed his face. It was a sneaker, worn, caked in mud. But I recognized it from the family photos on the Weaver's wall. It was Adam's, and he wasn't in it. I rose to my feet. This doesn't look like he just ran away. Grayson didn't speak right away. Then, in a low, careful voice, he said, "We're done here." I turned to him, stunned. "What?" "No, we're not." "Yes, we are." His tone was final. "We go back. Now." I clenched my fists. "He's out here, Grayson. He's out here, and you want to—" "Drop it, Lancaster." His voice was ice. I didn't drop it, and that was my first mistake. When we got back to the station, I went straight to my desk, pulling out old case files, news clippings, anything about missing people in Black Hollow. There were too many. Way too many. Some are labeled as runaways. Others were ruled as accidents. But the pattern was there. People disappearing without a trace. People who were never found. And the worst part, it happened every year. Same time. Same way. And no one ever questioned it. I looked up at the old plaque hanging on the wall. The one with the town's 5 rules. Rule 4. If someone goes missing, do not look for them. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I had already broken that rule. And I had a feeling Black Hollow was about to remind me why it existed. I pulled my jacket tighter around me as I walked down Main Street, the cold creeping in despite the early autumn sun. Black Hollow was a small town, but it wasn't the cozy, welcoming kind. It felt empty. Not in the physical sense. There were people, sure. They just weren't acting the way I expected. A kid had gone missing, and nobody seemed to care. Claire Weaver, Adam's mother, had been at the station that morning, red-eyed and shaking, begging for someone, anyone, to do something. But when I looked at Ethan, he just gave me that same hard stare and said, "We don't look for the missing." Like hell we don't. I had spent the last 2 hours knocking on doors, but every conversation felt the same. "He's gone," they'd say. Or, There's nothing to be done. And then, silence. No theories. No concern. Just quiet acceptance. The Weaver house sat at the end of a dirt road, the yard overgrown, the paint peeling. I knocked twice, and, after a long pause, the door creaked open. An old woman stood there, wrapped in a heavy cardigan despite the afternoon sun. Margaret Weaver, Adam's grandmother. Her eyes, clouded with age, drifted up to meet mine, and for the first time since I arrived in this town, I saw something familiar. Not fear, not ignorance, but understanding. "You're the new officer," she said, voice soft. "Yes, ma'am." I nodded. "Eric Lancaster. I'm looking into Adam's disappearance." She exhaled, slow and tired, before stepping aside. "Come in, then." The house smelled of old wood and dust, the kind of scent that settles into the bones of a place. A single clock ticked loudly from the wall, the only sound as she led me to the small kitchen. I waited while she poured tea, my patience wearing thin. No one in town wanted to talk, but she had invited me in. That meant something. "You shouldn't be looking for him," she finally said, setting my cup down with a soft clink. My jaw tightened. "Why not?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared out the window, hands folded in her lap. "The rules are for us," she whispered. I sat up straighter. "What rules?" For a long time, she didn't speak. Just when I thought she wouldn't answer, she turned to me, eyes sharp. "Did you hear the whistling last night?" The question caught me off guard. I thought back to my patrol. I had been driving near the woods when I'd heard something, just a faint, high-pitched sound. At the time, I thought it was the wind. I don't know," I admitted. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "If you hear it, you go inside. You lock your doors. You don't look outside, and you don't try to find the source." A chill crawled down my spine. She reached across the table, her frail hand covering mine. Her skin was cold. "Adam is gone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can't bring him back. And if you keep looking, you'll be next." A sharp knock at the front door made me jump. Margaret went still. I turned toward the sound, but she gripped my wrist, her strength surprising. "Don't open it," she said, her voice urgent now. I hesitated, then called out, "Who is it?" Silence. I looked back at Margaret. Her face had gone pale, her grip still tight. The knock came again. 3 slow, deliberate raps. I pulled my hand free, stood up, and made my way to the door. When I yanked it open, the porch was empty. The road beyond stretched out in the dimming afternoon light, shadows creeping over the edges of the forest. No footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. I turned back to Margaret, my heart hammering. She was still at the table, staring down at her tea. "I told you not to open it," she murmured. And then, barely loud enough to hear, "They know you now." The night air felt wrong. Cold, but not in a way that made sense. It wasn't the sharp chill of autumn or the damp bite of mountain air. It was heavy, clinging to my skin like something alive. The flashlight in my hand barely cut through the dark as I moved deeper into the woods, my boots crunching against dead leaves. I should have turned back. I knew that. Ethan's warning still echoed in my head. Low, firm, almost desperate. You don't want to go looking for things that don't want to be found. But Adam Weaver was missing. A 17-year-old kid, gone without a trace. No one was looking for him. No one but me. The trees stood tall around me, their branches tangled like fingers reaching for the sky. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. My own breathing felt too loud. My footsteps, too sharp. The wind had died somewhere behind me, and now the silence stretched, thick and unnatural. Then I heard it. A whistle. Faint. Far. Almost playful. I stopped, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. Another whistle. Closer this time. It wasn't a bird. No animal sounded like that. It was human. But there was something off about it. Something hollow, stretched out too long at the end. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the trees. Nothing. The whistle came again, this time from my left. Then, before I could move, another from my right. A third, behind me. My grip tightened around the flashlight. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. This was a trick. Someone was messing with me. Maybe some local kids. Maybe some lunatic who lived out here. Then I saw it. A scrap of red fabric tied to a low-hanging branch. I stepped closer, my pulse thudding in my ears. It was a torn piece of a jacket, fluttering slightly in the still air. I reached out, barely brushing my fingers against it. The whistle came again. This time, it was right in front of me. I snapped the flashlight up. Nothing. The beam cut through empty space, illuminating the trees, the undergrowth, the damp earth beneath my feet. But there was no one there. And yet, the feeling of being watched grew heavier, pressing against me like invisible hands. The trees ahead of me shifted. No, something moved between them. A shape. Tall. Too tall. I stumbled back, my breath catching. The shape didn't move like a person. It stretched, bending in a way that sent ice crawling up my spine. The whistle came again, but this time, it wasn't from one direction. It was all around me. I turned and ran. Branches whipped against my arms, my legs, but I didn't stop. The ground sloped downward, and I nearly lost my footing. My flashlight flickered, and for a single, terrifying moment, everything went black. When the light came back, I saw footprints in the dirt ahead of me. Not mine. Fresh. Deep. Leading toward town. My stomach twisted. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running. By the time I stumbled onto the main road, gasping for breath, Ethan was waiting. He stood by his truck, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might crack. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. I knew what he was going to say. I had broken the rules. And now, something knew my name. I sat in the dimly lit office, staring at the old plaque on the wall. 5 rules. 5 ridiculous, superstitious rules. Don't answer and knock past midnight. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my temples. Ethan had tried to warn me. So had Margaret. Even the rest of the town, in their own fearful silence, had tried to keep me from going too far. But I couldn't let this go. Adam Weaver was still missing. A 17-year-old kid had vanished, and no one seemed to care. I picked up the old case files I had dug out earlier. Years' worth of missing persons reports. The dates blurred together. People had been disappearing for as long as Black Hollow had existed. And every time, the same response. No search. No investigation. Just another name added to the list. I clenched my jaw and flipped the file shut. A soft tap echoed through the station. I froze. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. The air in the room felt heavier, like the walls were closing in. I glanced at the clock. 12:03 a.m. My pulse pounded in my ears. I turned toward the front door, my breath slow and shallow. Ethan's voice echoed in my head. If you hear knocking, don't answer it. I stood, my chair scraping against the wooden floor. My gun sat in its holster, a comforting weight on my hip. I reached for it instinctively. Then I took a step toward the door. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was deliberate, unhurried, not the frantic pounding of someone in distress. I swallowed hard. The town was quiet outside. Too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. I placed my hand on the doorknob. My fingers tingled with a strange numbness. The air felt colder. I wasn't supposed to do this, but I had to. I turned the knob and pulled the door open. The night was still. The streetlights flickered, casting weak, yellow halos onto the empty road. And then I saw him. Adam Weaver stood at the edge of the station steps, barefoot, his clothes torn and dirty. His face was pale, too pale, like all the color had been drained from his skin. Adam. My voice barely sounded like my own. He didn't move. His eyes were wide, staring straight through me. Something was wrong. I stepped forward, my heart hammering. Adam, it's me, Officer Lancaster. We've been looking for you. Silence. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Then, in a voice that wasn't his, he whispered, "You shouldn't have opened the door." A chill crawled up my spine. The streetlight above us buzzed and flickered. The shadows around Adam stretched unnaturally, twisting like they were alive. And then I heard it. The whistling. Faint at first, like wind slipping through cracks in a window, then growing louder. I turned my head toward the darkened street, my breath caught in my throat. The sound was coming from everywhere. A low, shivering tune. Not human. Not natural. Adam's lips parted wider. His jaw unhinged too far, stretching as if something else was inside him, using his body like a puppet. I staggered back. Something moved in the shadows beyond the streetlights. Tall, thin figures, shifting just out of sight. The whistling rose, piercing and sharp. I slammed the door shut and locked it. The station lights flickered. My hands were shaking. Outside, the knocking started again. Knock, knock, knock. I backed away, heart racing. Ethan had been right. I had broken the rules. And now, they were coming for me. The knocking wouldn't stop. It started soft. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. The clock on my nightstand read 3:12 a.m. The room felt too quiet, like the world outside had gone completely still. Then, the knocks came again. Louder this time. I sat up. My mouth was dry. My mind told me to stay put, to ignore it. Never answer a knock past midnight. That was rule number 1. But I had to know. Swinging my legs over the bed, I crept toward the door. My police-issued pistol sat on the table beside me. I picked it up, gripping it tight, as I stepped into the dark hallway. The wood floor creaked under my weight. The knocking continued. Steady. Unhurried. Like whoever was outside knew I was listening. I reached the door. Held my breath. Who's there? I whispered. Silence. The doorknob felt cold as my fingers curled around it. My pulse thundered in my ears. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to stop. But I'd spent my whole life following logic, not superstition. I wasn't about to change now. I turned the knob. The door opened an inch. Just enough to peer outside. The porch light flickered. A wave of cold air drifted in, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. At first, I saw nothing but darkness stretching to the tree-line. But then, a figure stood at the edge of the yard. A boy. My breath caught in my throat. Adam Weaver. He was barefoot, wearing the same clothes from the missing poster, a red hoodie and ripped jeans. His face was pale, lips slightly parted, eyes wide and unblinking. Adam. I stepped forward, but something stopped me. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. His face was too still, like a photograph frozen in time. Then his mouth opened, and a voice that wasn't his came out. You shouldn't have opened the door. The voice was deep, distorted. It came from his throat, but it didn't belong to him. The words echoed, stretching unnaturally in the stillness. A wave of ice shot through my body. I took a step back, hand tightening around my gun. Adam's head twitched, a sharp, unnatural jerk to the side, like a puppet with its strings yanked too hard. His mouth stretched wider, too wide. The porch light above me flickered violently. The whistling started, soft at first, drifting through the trees like wind through hollow bones. Then closer, louder. It was coming from everywhere. I slammed the door shut. My breath came in short gasps as I locked the deadbolt. The knocking didn't return, neither did the voice. But the whistling never stopped. I woke up in the woods, disoriented and covered in dirt. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. My hands trembled as I tried to push myself up, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. I couldn't remember how I got here. The trees loomed over me, their twisted branches swaying with an unnatural rhythm, almost as if they were breathing. I blinked hard, trying to clear my foggy head. Had it all been a dream? Had I just imagined the strange things in the woods? Adam's eerie, hollow eyes, the whispers in the trees, the thing lurking just beyond the line of sight. Had it really happened, or was it just the stress of this cursed town catching up to me? I stumbled to my feet, my heart pounding as I tried to get my bearings. The forest felt wrong, as if it had changed somehow in the short time I'd been unconscious, or maybe I'd been here longer than I realized. I noticed something unsettling. My footprints were still fresh in the mud, leading back toward town. But there was something else too, something that made my blood run cold. A second set of footprints, matching mine step for step, trailing behind me. They were deeper, more urgent, like something had been chasing me. I swallowed hard and started walking back, each step feeling heavier than the last. The further I moved, the more that feeling of being watched crept up on me again. It was as if the trees themselves were staring at me, the wind whispering my name. I could hear faint rustling behind me, and my heart raced in my chest. I didn't dare look back. When I finally reached the edge of the woods, I saw him. Ethan stood at the clearing, arms crossed, his eyes dark as always. But there was something else in his gaze, something I couldn't quite place. Resignation? Relief? No, it was something worse, something colder. "You're back," he said, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. There was no surprise, no sympathy in his tone, just an acknowledgement of something inevitable. I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry, like sandpaper. "What happened?" I croaked, but Ethan only shook his head, like he'd been waiting for me to ask. "You broke the rules," he said, his voice as blunt as a hammer strike. I wanted to protest, wanted to scream that I hadn't done anything wrong. But I knew I had. I had gone too far, broken something that shouldn't have been disturbed. I could feel it deep in my bones now. Would have been lurking in those woods, would have been keeping the town safe all these years. And what would happen if the rules were ever forgotten? "The thing in the woods," I whispered. My words felt like they were made of ice. "It's real, isn't it?" Ethan didn't respond right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his shadow swallowing me whole. His eyes, usually cold and unfeeling, now seemed almost regretful. "I didn't want you to learn this way," he said quietly. "But now you know. It's not just the rules that keep us safe. It's the fact that we keep them happy. And if you don't follow the rules, they take what's theirs. And they don't give it back." He paused, looking at me with a new, hard glint in his eyes. "You don't get to walk away from this." I felt like I was choking on air. The reality of what I had uncovered, what I had provoked, crashed over me like a tidal wave. My legs buckled, and I had to lean against a tree to keep myself upright. The weight of it all settled on me like a heavy blanket. The people in this town, their silence, their rituals, it wasn't just fear. It was survival. "You're going to help me now," Ethan said, and I wasn't sure if it was a question or an order. I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up a hand, cutting me off. "No more fighting. You'll follow the rules from now on, and we'll pretend like this never happened." I nodded, my mind reeling. I didn't know what else to do. The things I'd seen, the things I'd felt in the woods, were beyond anything I could explain, even to myself. This town wasn't just isolated. It was protected, and I had just shattered that fragile peace. We walked back to the station in silence, the weight of the town's secrets pressing down on me like a suffocating fog. Ethan didn't say a word, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole way. I didn't want to look at him, didn't want to see the unspoken warning in his gaze. But I could feel it. If I broke the rules again, I wouldn't make it out of Black Hollow. The things in the woods would make sure of that. When we got back to the station, Ethan handed me the plaque with the rules, its edges worn down by years of handling. He placed it in my hands like it was a sacred object, like it held the very life of the town in its chipped surface. "Learn them," he said, his voice low, "and never forget them." I stared at the plaque, my eyes tracing the rules written on it, the words that had seemed like meaningless superstition just days before. But now, they felt like a life raft in an ocean of darkness. I wasn't sure if I was saved or if I was already sinking. I could hear the faintest whistling in the distance, coming from the woods. I closed my eyes, gripping the plaque tighter. It was a sound I would never ignore again. "I'm staying," I whispered to myself, even though I wasn't sure who I was saying it to. Ethan, the town, or the thing in the woods. And as I stood there, the air grew colder. The whistling grew louder. And I knew, deep in my gut, that I had made a choice. There was no turning back now. I sat in the corner of the station, watching the new guy. He was young, maybe in his late 20s, fresh-faced like a city cop who thought he could change the world. His uniform was crisp, his hair still gelled in that perfect, arrogant style. He didn't know what he was walking into, and that made me feel uncomfortable. He stood by the door, squinting at the plaque, the one with the 5 rules. I'd been here for over a year now, and those rules had stopped being strange to me. They were just a part of life, like breathing or the constant hum of the old lights in the hall. They weren't worth questioning anymore. But this kid, he was reading them like they were some kind of joke. I watched him through the dust-covered blinds, waiting for that moment, the moment he would laugh. Sure enough, it came. He let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head as if he couldn't believe it. "Seriously," he muttered to himself. "Is this for real?" I didn't blame him. I'd been there too. I'd laughed too, back when I first arrived in Black Hollow. Back when I didn't understand. But now it was different. It was so different. I took a long drag from my cigarette, the smoke curling in the dim light of the office. I could hear him shuffling behind the counter, opening drawers, flipping through papers. The station was quieter than usual, the air thick with the kind of stillness that settled over this town when the sun started to dip. "First day on the job?" I asked, my voice low, almost swallowed by the silence. He jumped slightly, then turned to face me. His smile was confident, that kind of smile you have when you're about to make some grand declaration. "Yeah, Just got in this morning. Thought I'd check out the rules, get familiar. He was still smiling, like he was expecting me to play along with the joke. I leaned back in my chair and stared at him. There was a spark in his eyes, excitement, curiosity, maybe even a little disbelief. You think it's a joke? I asked. He didn't answer at first, just shrugged like it didn't matter. But I could see the shift in his posture. The way his eyes flicked to the door, the way his hand twitched toward his radio, just waiting for something to happen. I didn't speak again for a while. Instead, I just watched him. He went on organizing the desk, fumbling with paperwork he didn't need to touch. He was trying too hard to seem like he was in control, like nothing about Black Hollow could touch him. He was trying to be confident, but the town was already whispering to him. I could feel it. And then, just like that, it happened. The wind picked up outside. I could hear it rustling through the trees, a soft, low whistle that seemed to come from nowhere. It wasn't loud, not at first, but I knew that sound. I knew it. The new guy froze. His eyes snapped to the window, his face pale. That whistle, it wasn't the wind. Not really. I'd heard it before. A long time ago, it had been the thing that got me. Got everyone. It was the sound that told you everything was about to change. You hear that? He whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He was already looking at the door, his hand hovering near the handle. For a second, I thought he might bolt. But then the whistle stopped, and everything fell quiet again. Just like that, the world inside the station felt too small, too contained. The air thickened, and the silence pressed in like it had never done before. I could hear the hum of the old light fixture above us, the sound of my own heartbeat. The station had always felt empty in a way, but this was something else. I think I'm going to head out, he said, his voice shaking a little. I didn't move. You sure you want to do that? He hesitated. The door was a few steps away, and his eyes darted to the clock above the desk, almost like he was checking to see if it was too late to leave. You should stay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper now. It's better if you just stay inside. His face flushed. I'm fine. I just want to get settled. You can tell me more about the town later. I leaned forward in my chair, the creak of it loud in the quiet. You really think it's a good idea? I asked, my tone flat, the words heavier than I meant them to be. He didn't answer. Instead, he just looked at me, wide-eyed now, like he could finally see what I had seen. The truth, the dread, the knowing. I couldn't hear the whistle anymore, but I knew it was still out there, waiting. And then he did it. He reached for the door handle, turning it slowly. I watched him, and I felt it. His choice, the choice that no one who truly understood Black Hollow ever made. He stepped out into the night, into the waiting silence. The door clicked shut behind him. I stayed where I was, unmoving, staring at the spot where he had been. The wind picked up again, carrying that unmistakable whistle with it. Just faintly at first, but it would grow louder, closer, until it filled the air around the town, a constant, inevitable presence. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the softest knock, and I knew, in that quiet way, that the rules would never change, and neither would Black Hollow. I stood up slowly, taking one last look at the door. The new guy would learn, like I did, like everyone does. Eventually, outside, the whistling got louder, and I didn't need to look to know that he had already heard it too. I sat back down in my chair, alone again, waiting for the night to unfold.